Ladies and gentlemen, our next guest is making his first appearance on Submission Radio. He is the current ONE FC welterweight champion, former Bellator welterweight champion, and a decorated wrestler. Askren, welcome to Submission Radio.
Thanks for having me, guys. I've never done a show in Australia, so it's nice to get my name out there.
Well, you know what? We feel honored that we're your first. This is just as awesome for us. Now, before we get into the MMA, just quickly, Ben, let's talk disc golf. We hear that you were at one point the 9th in the amateur championships of the world. Tell us about disc golf. Is it similar to Froth from Seinfeld?
Oh, man. I don't know what they did on Seinfeld, but the disc golf, they just like a smaller frisbee. It's harder, and it's harder to throw. But man, it's spreading all over the world. It's a newer sport, and it's a very fun hobby for me to have.
Have you ever had one of those things where in a tournament and you throw the frisbee and it goes really high and then it comes back to you and you're like, ah, damn, that was a terrible throw?
Not for years and years and years.
You must teach us.
Yeah, that's me and Casper almost every weekend. Now, Ben, it's almost a week out from UFC 181 where you were in Anthony Pettis' corner for the title fight. You must be happy with Anthony's exciting performance against Gilbert.
Yeah, exactly. He did really well. Honestly, I mean, I practice with the guy, and I practice with a lot of high-level people, and I kind of know where he's at. And honestly, I kind of expected the performance he had, so it was exciting to see him fulfill kind of what I thought he was going to do, and he went out there and executed the game plan perfectly.
You know, Anthony's won his last couple of fights through submission victories. As someone who works out with him at, tell us about a little bit about his evolution, his grappling just over the last few years, and have fans been, focused on his striking game to notice how great he is at grappling?
Yeah. Well, one of the biggest things I think Anthony does really well is he transitions into everything, from wrestling to striking to grappling. It's not like separate things to Anthony. It's all just one big thing, right? And so his transitions from other stuff, and so when people are worried about his strikes, then that's when his submissions are open. And, he's been able to stop those takedowns, so he's been able to put himself in a little better position. And then obviously he softens everyone up with the strikes. I mean, Gilbert took a lot of really hard strikes before that submission, so it was almost it's like it all works together. It really meshes for Anthony. I think he's one of the most successful people on the planet right now in his transition game. Just the way he chains moves together and different facets of MMA.
Now, Ben, you're obviously, one of the best welterweights in the world and a welterweight champion yourself. We're just wondering, did you take a moment to watch the Lawler versus Hendricks fight? And who do you think won that fight? And to follow up with that, do you think that Robbie Lawler will be the new long-term UFC welterweight champion now?
Well, I actually didn't get to watch it live. I had to catch a red-eye flight for Anthony's fight because I had some stuff going on back in Wisconsin the next day. So once Anthony was done, I said the congrats. We went and hung out in the locker room for a few minutes, and then I hit the road. So I did get to watch it Tuesday night, and I would have scored a 3-2 for Hendricks. That was my feeling, and I don't like Hendricks. So it's not like I'm giving it to him because I like him. That's just how I would have scored it, how I thought I saw the fight going. Obviously, if it's like ONE FC where you score the fight as a whole, after the fight, I think I'd give it to Lawler, but that's not the way North American MMA is scored.
Well, exactly. Obviously, ONE FC, it's a different scoring system. You get scored for the whole fight. Just before we talk about that, you mentioned you don't like Hendricks. Why don't you like Johny Hendricks?
We've kind of had a long-term rivalry since high school, went to opposing colleges for wrestling, and he's just not a very likable person in general.
Some people have some comments about him. And, just finally finishing off with the questions about UFC 181, just quickly wanting to touch on your thoughts about the CM Punk signing. Obviously, everybody had, an interesting reaction to it. It was certainly unexpected. What did you think when you found out Punk was going to be a part of the UFC?
Well, I had been hearing rumors on Twitter about that happening, but for it to actually happen, it was kind of bizarre because when you think about it, the UFC in its inception was a spectacle, right? They brought all these people together, and no one knew it was going to happen, and people tuned in because of that fact. But since then, it's went from spectacle to sport, where we have real legitimate competitors. They know what they're doing. Everyone's a good, solid fighter, and so it's kind of turned into a sport, right, where it was really a spectacle. And now UFC, who is, the leader, obviously is trying to go more mainstream, but now it's almost like they're going back to spectacle because you can't really expect that a 36-year-old man who's got no combat sports experience is going to come into the UFC and be effective. I mean, it's simply to sell pay-per-views.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, when Brock came in a few years ago, there was a big MMA boom and pay-per-view numbers did great. And if you look at the numbers for, say, the UFC, I mean, they're not doing that great. Do you think maybe Punk's signing could be a good thing for the sport and bring another boom?
Well, I don't think so, because Brock could be competitive because of his wrestling background. He was able to be in a good fight. Every fight he was in was you thought he could win, right? And the same can't be said for CM Punk. So, who can they match him up with that people are actually going to be convinced he can win the fight? There's not a lot of those fights for him. So, honestly, I see him maybe doing one or two big fights tops and then being out of it. And maybe it'll give a momentary bump, but not a big one and not a long-term one.
Now, Ben, let's. Oh, sorry, Cass. I didn't mean to interrupt. Do you have something you want to say?
No. Sorry. You go.
Okay. Yep. Now, Ben, let's move on to you because we do have a limited amount of time. For a while, people have criticized you for not finishing your fights. However, in your last fights, you've had a lot of TKOs and submissions. Your fight especially was impressive when you won the ONE FC Welterweight Championship and destroyed veteran Suzuki. What do you attribute these finishes to, and did you change something specifically in your training recently?
No, it was just time. I came into the sport as a rookie. I won the Bellator title when I had 18 months of fighting experience under my belt. So the jiu-jitsu and the striking weren't things that came naturally to me because I'd never done them before in my life. So it just took time, and people were they thought because I was a Bellator champ I had well-rounded skills and stuff, but it took time to build those other skills, and now I've been in a great camp at Duke's for getting close to 3.5 years. So now, now I feel like I'm a well-skilled mixed martial artist, and it's been showing in my last fights. I mean, I've really been dominant in my last 4 fights, finished every one of them, and the outcome has never been in question.
Dominant's a pretty big understatement. Now, you are obviously one of the best, if not the best, welterweights in the world, and you're not in the UFC. One of the other guys that's sort of in a similar boat is Jon Fitch. Now, he recently expressed interest in fighting you on the MMA Hour, and he said that he'd be open to going over to Asia where ONE FC is based. What do you think about a possible fight against Jon Fitch? Would you be interested?
Yeah, I'll beat up anyone at any time. I always tell people my job is to be a fighter. It means to step in the cage and beat up who's ever across from me. And my manager's job is to book those fights. So I will beat up who's ever in the cage across from me. And if it so happens to be Jon Fitch, I mean, he knows that's not a wise decision. He knows it's a terrible decision on his part. So if he's dumb enough to make that decision, feel free, John.
And, I guess a lot of people want to see that fight because both of you are such great grapplers. But just quickly touching on it, what do you think would be an advantage that you'd have over Jon in that fight if it does happen?
I'm better in every single area. I'm a better wrestler. I'm a better grappler. I'm a better striker. I'm stronger. I'm younger. I'm faster. You pick it.
Now, you seem pretty sort of easygoing in terms of who you want to fight. I'm not sure what your current contract is with ONE FC, but would it be possible to see you maybe facing World Series of Fighting's welterweight champion Rousimar Palhares and you possibly claiming another world title?
Yeah, that's another one. Like I said, I'm going to fight who's across the cage from me. So, if that were to happen, he were to come over, let's do it. At this point in my career, I'm fairly indifferent to who I fight. If I'm going to claim to be the best fighter in the world, I got to accept all challengers.
Now, Ben, you said many times that it's not a must for you to fight in the UFC in your career, and you've already, obviously, you're one of the best in the world. Just wondering, what's your motivation to keep fighting? What drives you in the sport? And also, the UFC move, is it something that you just don't care about at this point? It's something that you're not interested any longer?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to fight for the number 1 spot in the world, which would be a lot easier if I was over in that organization. But obviously, there's a lot of politics and other things that going into making that happen. It's not like the Wrestling World Championships where you can, go to the U.S. Nationals, win your national tournament, and then go to the Worlds, and you win the Worlds, and you're the world champion, right? It's not that easy. So, at this point, I'm just going to fight who's in front of me, like I've said multiple times. And my management and all the politics, hopefully they'll eventually take care of themselves.
Sure. Now, we've got a few fan questions for you, Ben. We told the fans to come on the show, so we'll get a few of those out. Adamant wants to know, right? You and GSP, it's been a matchup talked about for ages. He wants to know, how would you deal with GSP's stalling and lay and pray tactics?
Well, no one. I haven't been held down in ever. Never ever have I been held down. So I don't think that's something I would have to worry about at all in that fight.
Forrest Kreis has a question for you, Ben. He wants to know, could you make 155, and would that be a possibility for you in the future if you wanted to do that?
No, I can't make 155. I wrestled 163 in the Olympics, and that was probably the bare bottom for me. I mean, I was on a diet for a whole year for that, and really the weight cut was still hard, and so I can't really imagine going down another 8 pounds beyond 163.
What about middleweight, Ben? Would you ever consider, if you clean out the welterweight division, would you ever go to middleweight?
I guess I'm not 100% opposed to it. I figure I might as well just fight everyone and prove I'm the best welterweight first, and then worry about those things later.
Sure. Now, we're going to do something called the Submission Radar Tap-Out Round. Is how we round out all interviews. Just a bunch of fun questions, and basically we'll rattle them off. You answer with the first thing that comes to your mind. Are you ready?
Yep, let's do it.
Have you ever had any urges about having another crack at the Olympics?
No.
Finish this sentence, Ben. People don't know that I
don't know. I'm a pretty open book. I tell everyone everything I do. So, man, I can't think of a good one right off the bat.
That's a good point. We're going to have to wait till the Ben Askren book comes out, and then we find out some secrets.
Yeah.
Describe Duke Roufus in one word.
Ooh. Intense.
Intense. Sounds like a good MMA coach. Now, we saw some more pictures of you back in college with an awesome, huge afro. Any chance of you bringing it back in 2015, really growing it out?
No, man. I don't know how I grew it for that long. It's just like when it gets long now, it drives me crazy, and I have to cut it.
Okay. Now, give us your go-to submission in training.
Say arm triangle.
Here's another question. Would you be interested in participating in Meta Morris? And if so, who would your dream opponent be?
Yeah, I've said a bunch of times on Twitter I would do that, and same thing. I'll take on any comers. Let's say GSP or Johny Hendricks to make it fun.
All right, awesome. Now that the cage has been legalized in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia, are there any plans that you know of about ONE FC coming down to Australia and you possibly fighting down here?
That would be sweet. I got a friend over there in Newcastle, Australia. I want to come see. So yeah, I told ONE FC that they need to go to Australia, but I think they're being very strategic about their expansion opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hopefully one day we get to see you and Rob Lazita coming here and obviously fighting. Now, Ben, we haven't seen you. Well, last question, Ben. We haven't seen you fighting since August. How soon can we expect Ben Askren back?
I'm hoping to fight in February. So that's kind of what ONE FC's hinted at, and that's what I'm hoping for.
Awesome. Well, guys, don't forget to follow Ben Askren on Twitter at Ben Askren. It's been a pleasure having you on the show, and I hopefully get to chat to you soon, Ben.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.